In today's video, I'm going to give you 2 simple steps to make your swing more effortless, more repeatable, more consistent. Make sure to check out this video. I'm pretty happy with that 7-iron there. So today's video, as I mentioned there in the intro, is actually going to be about making your swing more effortless. We've all seen and perhaps played with golfers or gone to a pro event where you've seen a golf swing and you've thought it looks like effortless speed, effortless power, that they get the club back to the ball the same way each time. If we can improve our backswing, we've got a real good chance. So 3/4 of our golf swing time is taken up with the movement back. The downswing is over in 1/4 of that, about 0.2 of a second. So trying to change your downswing is not impossible, but it's hard, okay? So if we can get to the right position at the top, we've got a pretty good chance of getting to the right position on the downswing. Now that doesn't suggest, or don't take it from that you shouldn't work on a downswing move, but get your backswing into a position where it's going to help your downswing. And we're going to focus on 2 areas. The first part is going to be the takeaway position. And the second part is going to be how do we move the club from the takeaway to the top? And it's all about this turning around a tilted axis, pivoting correctly in your golf swing. So the first move, let's touch on that, the takeaway. This is such a key part. And I'm demonstrating this with a 7-iron, but this would be relevant with any golf club, whether we're talking about a wedge, a 7-iron or a driver, it doesn't matter. The takeaway key points that I'd like to see is the big dominating force in my takeaway is actually my torso, my upper body, moving the golf club. So it's torso and shoulders moving the club away from the ball. Now, is there a little bit of hip rotation? Yeah. Is there a little bit of change in knee flex? Absolutely. But my focus point and the bigger movement is actually what I'm doing with my upper body. I get a lot of people questioning the takeaway. Should it be the lead hand? Should it be the trail hand? I would say focus on the big engine of your golf swing, the body itself, and we really want the upper body dominating this first movement because it's turning quicker than my lower body. So I'm making that movement with my upper body, and the checkpoints I like to see is the club head just slightly outside my hands, and I'd like the leading edge of the golf club to be a similar angle to my spine, to my back. And if you're not new to my channel, you've heard me bark on about this quite often. It's such a key part for me of the golf swing. Many faults are created here. So if we can get that club just outside our hands and the club face matching our spine, we're in a real good start position. And that's not that hard to achieve, but how many golfers do you think I see that get that face open, that get that club inside their hands? It's a lot. It's a big, big number. I haven't got a number for you, but it's a big number. So first of all, let's touch on why we'd like the club just slightly outside our hands, just very quickly. With the club just slightly outside our hands, as I now rotate, so as I now get this lead shoulder working down underneath my chin, it's easier to keep that club slightly behind my hands at the top of the golf swing. For that golfer who gets the club more behind them, even if they get the face angle good here, they generally then have to make some sort of lifting movement. They can't just continue rotating with the club going further and further back. So there tends to be more of a lifting movement. Quite often we see this trail arm lift. In the backswing, we may even start to see the club pointing cross-lined, and that's very difficult to make a good downswing. There are a couple of great players who do it, but not the majority. So it's easier if the club is slightly outside our hands in the takeaway, because then at the top of the golf swing, it's slightly behind my hands. Okay, and that's an easier position because on the downswing, we'd like the club to stay behind our hands. What we see with most mid to high handicap golfers is the club moving out in front of them, steepening that shaft. So that's where I'd like that. The reason for the club face position, well, that is square to my plane. Okay, so if we were playing baseball and we just rotated to this position where the club is parallel to the ground, you would see the toe of the golf club straight up in the air. Well, if now, because I'm actually playing golf and the ball's on the ground, I tilt from my hips, you can see that is now that square club face position. It is rotating, it is opening on the backswing, it has to close on the downswing, but only gets to square by impact and then it's closing on the way through. So the golf swing is always opening on the way back and always closing on the way down. But many golfers get that face too open too quickly, excessively open, and then they have to store body and play catch up with hands. There tends to be that real throwaway release position to try and square the club face. So that takeaway move, a real key part. If you struggle with it, I would encourage you to actually focus on the ball, stop, check. You might do this once or twice. I'm going to do it one more time before you go ahead and hit the golf ball. Okay, so it's a pre-swing rehearsal. It's something I'm doing before I'm hitting the golf ball. I'm feeling that movement. I wouldn't watch the club go back because then you start to over-rotate body. My shoulders have turned too much. I want you to focus on the golf ball, stop at that position, tilt your head back and check. And we're just checking the club is slightly outside my hands rather than inside my hands. And that leading edge about the angle of my spine, so slightly turned down. That really means my wrist angles are good here. So nice flat lead wrist, my trail hand feels like it's a little bit more on top. And that helps with my wrist angles by the time I get to the top of the golf swing. So there I've got a very neutral lead wrist, nice and flat. If we're going one way or another, again, we've got to make some other movements in the downswing to match that up. And it's not that we can't play good golf from there, but we're talking about making the swing effortless, right? Simple. So let's go for simple takeaway to be good wrist positions at the top of the golf swing. Everybody says, right, I can do this first movement. What do I do from there? Well, the movement from that takeaway position can be as simple as, again, focusing on the big muscles, the engine of the golf swing, your body, rather than what the hands and arms are doing. And I would say from that first movement, I would encourage golfers to focus on their lead shoulder. So that's my left shoulder for a right-handed golfer, working down underneath my chin. Okay, so my lead shoulder is almost moving to about where the second button on my polo shirt would be, about in the middle of the zip on this jumper. So I'm getting my lead shoulder working down and in front of me. That gets my trail shoulder and my trail hip moving up and behind me. So now I have rotated, but I've maintained my spine angle. So I'm rotating around my spine, maintaining that position. Again, simple. If we're changing our spine angle in the backswing, we've got to change it again in the downswing. So you could talk about generating more power by extending a little bit more in the backswing, getting your arms further away. Absolutely. But again, we've got to get back down into that position. So we're talking about making the golf swing simple, effortless, a little bit more repeatable for your average golfer who's not going to spend hours and hours and hours a day hitting golf balls. We're talking about this first movement, and then focusing on that lead shoulder down, moving down underneath my chin. As you can see, as my lead shoulder moves down in front of me, my arms move up and behind me, okay? And I am getting to top of the backswing position where I've created that full 90-degree shoulder turn. My hips have maybe turned half of that, a little bit less. My arms are stretched out away from me, and I've got that very neutral club face position. So takeaway position, and lead shoulder working down underneath my chin, and that's getting me to that top of the backswing position where it's going to make it a hell of a lot easier to make a good downswing. So very quickly, in terms of drills, in terms of exercises, I love a simple one for the takeaway position, just grabbing an alignment stick, popping up the side of the golf club under your lead arm, and in that first movement, all we're trying to do is keep it in contact with my lead hip. Okay, now you can see it works down. It works from probably my kidney here, my sort of abdominal side abdominals, and it's working down, and it gets probably closer to my belt buckle hip, but it's staying in contact with my lead side. And you can see that means the club is outside my hands, leading edge of the golf club, because there's no real wrist action there, is matching my spine angle. There hasn't been rotation where the cane comes away from me. And you could use the cane for the second part. So I love getting golfers to feel what it's like to do, to rotate around their spine, to maintain their spine angle. So I get golfers to focus on the ball, put a cane or a club across your shoulders, get it level. Arms across chest to hold it in place. Focus on the golf ball, and all I want is my lead shoulder moving down and in front of me. Okay? So this orange cane is slightly behind the golf ball. So I've loaded into that trail foot my pressure. I've moved slightly behind the golf ball. I've got this at right angles to my target line, so I could put another stick down on the ground. So I know that I've created at least that 90-degree shoulder turn if I match this orange line to that yellow line on the floor. But I'm also getting this point pointing down in front of me, around 3 feet or so in front of the golf ball. So if I put a big tee here, one of my wave tees pointing out in front of me, I'm roughly getting the stick pointing down at that point, okay? So I have maintained my spine angle because I've got this lead shoulder moving down and in front of me. And I often write on people's gloves, left shoulder down, LSD, something along those lines, really trying to get them to focus on that point of the left shoulder working down underneath the chin. Takeaway position, left shoulder down, and you can see that gets me to a really good top of the backswing position where I can just deliver the club without overthinking it. So I've hit there 3 pretty good 7-irons. You can see one might have been a fraction left, but they're roughly down my target line. Very similar ball flights, flying the same distance. So I'm repeating my action. Is it a little bit harder as the club gets longer and less loft? Yeah, potentially, although the club head gets a little bit bigger. I'd prefer you to think of it that way. But the movement we're trying to make is very much the same. I'd like that takeaway 2 checkpoints to be the same, club outside hands, leading edge at spine angle, and I'd still like that lead shoulder work down underneath my chin. Now, because the club is longer, let's very quickly jump onto it. Because the club is longer and I'm stood a bit further away from it, you would probably see the majority of golfers, their shoulders are slightly flatter. I'd still use that checkpoint of about 3 foot outside the golf ball because I am actually stood further away from the golf ball. And it just means my shoulders aren't quite as steep as they were with an iron with a club on the ground, but my feels are very much the same in terms of that takeaway movement and my lead shoulder working down underneath my chin. That's not really changing. It's just the length of the golf club, the lie angle of the golf club has moved me slightly differently, but my thought process, very much the same. I think if you can get those two parts correct in your golf swing, it's really going to help you become a more consistent player. Put some comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback if this video has helped you. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. Loads of instructional videos already on there, and I film 2 a week. Plus, YouTube right now is suggesting the next video of mine that's relevant for you is just here, so click on it and check it out.